Hello everybody and welcome to today's vlog here from the airfield of the former RAF Lindholme, and it's absolutely frosty as this morning. I've got my gloves with me, but this is another deadly story from this airfield. On the 31st of October 1944, a Halifax bomber left RAF Sandtoft and almost immediately got into trouble. This plane was at one of only a few instances in Doncaster and the surrounding area, like around South Yorkshire really, where civilians were killed as part of the war effort that was outside of the cities where the cities were actually bombed. It brought unimaginable scenes to the local area of Hatfield Woodhouse, to the main road, the A614, which is directly opposite where I am now. And in turn, it brought the tragedy of the war to the lives of the locals who lived around here, who just hadn't seen anything like this before, not on the streets, not on the roads. Yes, there'd been crashes on the moors. Yes, there'd been crashes here at RAF Lindholme and a lot of the other surrounding airfields as well. But there just weren't that very many in public spaces. I'm just walking alongside now the old hangars from RAF Lindholme. Everything has been left in such a sorry state of repair. It's truly upsetting to see it, because when I first got permission to walk around here from HMP Lindholme, this was really quite well kept and maintained, and that was back in 2018. So we're only really going back 6 or 7 years. And a lot of these little paddock areas are now used for dog patrols to be able to teach their dogs. But coming up is the actual watchtower, and that is in a shocking state of disrepair. Yeah, back in 2008 there wasn't even a broken window in the place, and now the whole coffee filter at the top, that was the additional adage in the 60s, which was added to the 1938 structure, has now been completely destroyed. All the windows have been smashed out. Let me see if I can get in here to give you a better look. So it's been vandalised, spray painted. It looks like it's a dumping ground for all of the prison waste. It truly is in a very, very sorry state of disrepair. Back to our history story for today. So again, this is taken from my friend Richard's website, who's done all of the research for this. And this is the story of Halifax LL226, which crashed on Lindholme Airfield, but unfortunately the trajectory of the plane pushed it off the airfield, through a bomb store, and it ended up landing on a civilian residence at the other side of the A614, but I'll get into that in a second. So on the 31st of October 1944, the crew of this 1667 heavy conversion unit aircraft took off from Sandfield Airfield at 18:56 hours to undertake a nighttime cross-country training flight. At around 20 hours, the port inner engine failed due to loss of oil pressure, and it was then shut down by the crew, and the propeller blade on the faulty engine was feathered. Because of this, the crew opted to return to base. Within 5 minutes of returning to Sandtoft, the point outer engine suddenly started emitting sparks and smoke began to pour from it. This engine then shut down and the propeller feathered. With 2 engines shut down, the aircraft then began to lose height quickly, which prevented the crew from bailing out as it got below a safe height for their parachutes to work properly. They would not be able to reach Sandtoft Airfield at the rate of descent the aircraft was making. The airfield lighting at Lindholme was being displayed, so the pilot opted to try and force land as close as he could to there with the wheels up. The aircraft ended up being slightly too high to make a good landing within the site of Lindholme Airfield. It also made an approach downwind. When it touched down, At 22:37 hours, it landed on the grass parallel to the west-northwest runway, but close to the end of it near the perimeter track. It then slid over the perimeter track, through the boundary hedge, across the road and into a bungalow. As a result of the crash, the aircraft was badly damaged by a fire that developed after the crash. Unfortunately, 2 members of the crew died as a result of the crash, as did the 2 civilian occupants of the house, and also an unfortunate cyclist who was on the road at the time. The location of this incident is given as being Hatfield in the local newspaper report, but it almost certainly, because of the reporting restrictions, they could not give the location, being at the side of Lindholme airfield. It would appear to be the bungalow, now within trees, hidden by the side of the A614 and opposite the entrance to Dale Pit Lakes. The 2 young men who were killed on that plane are as follows. Pilot was Pilot Officer Llewellyn William Linklater, RAAF, age 20, of Auburn, New South Wales, Australia, buried at Harrogate Stonefall Cemetery in Yorkshire. And the other young gentleman was Flight Engineer Sergeant Charles Leonard Hill, RAF VR, age 19, of Pendleton, Salford. He died of his injuries and is buried at Peel Green Cemetery in Lancashire. The civilians who were killed in the bungalow are as follows. Mr. Henry Wraith, age 74, killed. Burial location unknown. Then civilian Mrs. Annie Wraith, aged 58, killed. Burial location unknown. An update on that, which I will end this video with, is I have found them. I know where they are, and I am going to go and pay my respects. So behind me now, as you can probably see in here, is the noise of the A614. I've come to the exact opposite end of the airfield as to where I started out with the story. So here with this line of pine trees, sort of covers the road, and then down there at the very end near the corner is where this accident and crash happened. Now, I think it's important to say that the road is so dangerous now, you would have to be a lunatic to cycle on it. It would probably be a death trap for anybody wanting to go out on a cycle today, just because of the volume and speed of the traffic that goes down there. But in the 1940s, that would have been absolutely commonplace. You know, most people would have got about either by walking or by cycling. And it really is known that even though there was a lot of RAF vehicles here and a lot of military vehicles, the actual men that worked here usually came from a train station down the road at Finningley. And that train station served not only RAF Finningley, but RAF Lindholme, RAF Sandtoft. If the men weren't brought here by military vehicles, they tended to get about by train as well. But one of the reasons why it's important to note about this particular cyclist is because if you go in that direction, towards Finningley, over there, that is the train station. This cyclist was going in that direction, towards Hatfield Woodhouse. So he was either going to go see friends, maybe a girlfriend, or that's where the pub was. So there's every chance that this poor cyclist was either going to or returning home from the pub. Bless him. And his name, the cyclist, LAC Thomas Simpson Nixon, RAF VR, aged 39, of Stanwick, Carlisle, and is buried at Stanwick Cemetery, Carlisle, in Cumbria. The other gentlemen on board, who very luckily survived that crash, even though were injured, were as follows. So there is bomb aimer Sergeant Archibald McIntyre Drummond, RAAF, navigator Flight Sergeant Harold James Kyle, RAAF, wireless operator and air gunner Flight Sergeant Joseph Eric Brown, RAAF, Air Gunner Flight Sergeant Leonard Albert Wright of the RAAF, and Air Gunner Flight Sergeant Daniel Mannix Joseph Whitty, who again was RAAF. The little bit of information that we have about two of the crew members. Llewellyn Linklater was born on the 23rd of February 1924 at Auburn, New South Wales, Australia, and was the son of Joseph Llewellyn and Marie Linklater. He enlisted for RAAF Sydney service in Sydney. Leonard Wright must only have sustained minor injuries because in February 1945 he was back flying again. He was involved in the accident in a Kitty Hawk A29-354 on the 22nd of February 1945 back in Australia. Now, just to give you an idea of location, I'm just coming up to what used to be the main entrance of the A614, and I will just do a quick turnaround in a second. Here we go, spinning around, and there behind me is the Northern Radar. So we are on Northern Radar corner of the airfield, and it's just a couple of 100 metres up here where the plane would have left the airfield and unfortunately gone into the bungalow. Not only was the cyclist on the road that night, but also other men from RAF Lindholme. They were making their way back from the local pub at the time of the crash, which was in Hatfield Woodhouse. The Robin Hood and Little John was a regular with both air crew and ground crew alike. The A614, which is again this long road, goes straight into the village, probably a mile away from here, straight to where the pub is, which was obviously frequented a lot by these gentlemen. None of the men that were on the road that day that were part of the RAF had ever witnessed a scene like this before. So even though they were part of the RAF, and even the men that were up in the planes, they were usually several hundred or thousand metres away from the action. They had never seen carnage like what unfolded in front of them as they walked home from the pub that night. In a witness statement taken at the time, the men were overwhelmed by the smell of cooking meat due to the fire, which of course would have been the humans that had died in the plane crash, and you just cannot imagine how awful that would have been for them. So now I'm on the corner of the A614. So this is the last bit of runway, and I must say it has been heavily torn up by the local farmers. They have had something stood on here like sugar beet or something, no idea actually what it was. It looks like sugar beet to me. Let's go and have a look. So because of all of the tractor movement on here, this is the last remaining part of the runway here at RAF Lindholme. The bungalow that was part of the crash is literally just over there at the other side of those trees. I won't show it because it is somebody's private residence and it has been rebuilt. Yeah, this is sugar beet, look. Very, very cold sugar beet, but that's what it is. So here is probably the best surviving bit of runway. This is probably the bit where they haven't really hammered it with the tractors and machinery. And if you look directly over there, straight into the sun, this runway would have gone to the side of the watchtower, which is where we have just come from. So the plane tried to get back to Sandtoft, saw that there was lights here at RAF Lindholme, decided to use the return runway here instead because the ground crew lit up the way for them to come. They didn't have time to get their wheels down. They belly skidded on the ground at the side of the runway, Due to that and the trajectory of the plane itself, it skidded across the perimeter track here, straight through the end of the runway, over the road, and unfortunately not only into the cyclist but also Mr. and Mrs Wraith's bungalow. So the last piece in this puzzle, when I was doing my research, I was absolutely blown away that a group of locals to where I live, actually in my village of Hatfield, had come across this story as well, but only 10 years ago, literally 10 years ago. And they decided to honour Mr. and Mrs Wraith. Now, at the time, I think the story goes that they didn't have any children, so that they were unable at the time to have somebody that would put them up a headstone or anything like that. So what the local community did 10 years ago is contact the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Oh, ice, hang on a second, let me get over the ice without killing myself. Yep, they contacted the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and asked whether or not it would be possible for this lady and gentleman to be commemorated and looked after, just like the gentleman who died in war in the same plane crash. And the Commonwealth War Graves Commission said yes. So I'm going to take you there now. I'm not going to say anything when I record in a cemetery. It's not for me to do that, but I just want to show you the kindness of the community in remembering this couple. Thank you so much for watching. I upload every Thursday at 4 PM Greenwich Mean Time. I've got no idea what time that is in the rest of the world. If you enjoy our stories, either the hiking, camping, climbing mountains or product testing, which comes out on a Thursday, or on a Saturday, the war research that we try and do here at RAF Lindholme as often as possible, please click subscribe. It's completely free to do, it won't cost you a penny. Also, when you click subscribe, there's a little bell notification. If you click on that, it'll tell you as and when you upload. The more interest we get in our Wilhelm's Kit channel, the easier it is for YouTube to actually get us out there and to help us and to just tell the story of these really, really brave men that gave their lives for our country. And if you've watched any of my vlogs, any of my previous playlist on RAF Lindholme, I'm not just talking about British guys here. There really wasn't. Here, based at RAF Lindholme, and in our local cemetery at Hatfield, we have gentlemen from all over the Commonwealth. Yes, there was English stationed here, but also Polish, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand. The list goes on. South African even. If you are from any of those countries or any of the Commonwealth countries, I can almost guarantee that between the three immediate airfields here, RAF Sandtoft, RAF Lindholme and RAF Finningley, you would have had a representative. Hopefully I'll get around to telling their stories as well. Thank you so much for watching. See you next week. Bye bye.
like that vlog today?
Yeah.
And what do you do now?